You know how sometimes you always get those characters on one show, and then a few years later, someone else does their own interpretation of it, and you look back and realize, wow, that older version actually wasn't done very well. That's what this is like. So everybody, those of you that are joining with me today, if you don't know me, my name is David, and today I'm going to be talking about Smallville Season 10, Episode 9, Patriot. And for those of you that have not been following me on my Smallville reviews, the reason why I'm looking back at Smallville is because sometimes you see a character in Arrow or The Flash or in Gotham or something that, hey, that character used to be on Smallville before. And I like going back and rewatching old versions of those characters, especially when it comes to live action versions, because I think the live action versions are something we don't get enough of, especially nowadays that these characters are becoming more self-aware to the public. And it's shows like Smallville and Arrow and Flash and Gotham, etc., that are helping bring awareness a little bit more to these characters. And the reason why I'm doing this episode is because Deathstroke, aka Slade Wilson, is in this episode. Those of you that don't know, Manu Bennett plays Deathstroke on Arrow, and there was a version of him on Smallville too. There was a version of the Deathstroke Slade Wilson character on Smallville, and I thought, let's go back and rewatch it, since I already did the same thing with Flash, Arrow, and Black Canary. I thought it would be cool to check out the first live action version of Slade Wilson. So let's check this out. What was this episode about? Basically, the government is after vigilantes, and they want to use the Vigilante Registration Act to have heroes like Clark and Green Arrow, etc., sign up to work for them and them only. Green Arrow, aka Oliver Queen, doesn't really, trust these guys, so he decides to look into it a little bit more. Clark, meanwhile, is investigating Aquaman because Aquaman is back in town and he just attacked one of the government's harbors. Why? Because we find out that Aquaman knows a little bit more to the government's plan than, Oliver and Clark might realize. We also meet Mara, who is working with Aquaman and is Aquaman's new girlfriend. Lois is also having some, she's kind of sad because she wants Clark to let her in more on all these missions. And she eventually learns that, hey, she can, as long as Clark accepts her into his, little rendezvous. First of all, let's start off with Aquaman himself, because this was technically his team-up episode with Clark once again. We were introduced to Aquaman back in Season 5. He came back for 2 more episodes, one in Season 6 for Justice, which was the Justice League episode that they did, the very first one, and then he came back for the Season 8 premiere. And this was his 4th and last time on the show, even though he would return sort of one more time, but you wouldn't see his face because they didn't really get the actor back, but they had him at a funeral of one of the other characters. This was the 4th and final time for Alan Ritchson as this character. And it's interesting seeing how the character of Aquaman evolved throughout those 4 episodes, because you can kind of see that there was, not in the first 2 appearances, but in the 3rd appearance and this appearance, you can see that Aquaman's attitude had started to change, because in the beginning he started off as this, hey dude, bro, all that stuff, kind of surfer dude kind of guy, I guess. And in this episode, they changed his attitude completely. He was more of the straight and darker and serious route, which was an interesting take. And personally, I actually prefer this version more than the first 2 versions that we saw of his Season 8 premiere appearance. Was actually a little bit better because they toned him down, I noticed, in that episode. He wasn't saying bro and dude as much as he did in his first 2 appearances. But this episode, he didn't say it at all, as far as I remember anyways. And yeah, I thought Aquaman was really handled well here. And it was cool seeing him not just team up with Clark this time, but because Oliver was a regular now on the series, he was interacting with Oliver too. We got to see more interaction with him and Oliver also, which was really cool. Like I said, I am doing this episode because Slade Wilson is in here, and Slade is also on Arrow, a different interpretation of him. So I gotta talk about Slade Wilson, and what did I think of him? Basically, he is not the Slade Wilson we think he is. He doesn't have the codename Deathstroke, at least not yet. He does get it later on in another episode. But in this episode, he is a general, and he is working for the army, and he's the one that decides to start this Vigilante Registration Act. Unfortunately, he's not as, combat ready as he should be, because he is a little bit older than the version we see on Arrow. So, yeah, the older version doesn't seem as badass as Manu Bennett. I'm gonna admit that right now, because the whole point of these videos is for me to compare this version to the current version that we're seeing on Arrow, or The Flash, or whatever show these characters appear on. And yeah, I'm gonna admit, I remember back in the day, I thought he was an alright character. I seen a lot of people complain that he was too old, and I didn't know what they meant by that, because, I don't read too much comics. But now seeing the version of Deathstroke on Arrow, and seeing some animated versions of him now too, since this episode of Smallville aired, I think this was back in like 2011 or 10. Yeah, there's been a lot of other interpretations of this character, and I gotta admit, now looking back at it, he doesn't seem as threatening as the more current version that we see on Arrow, played by Manu Bennett. And in that sense, it's kind of disappointing, but to be fair, it works for the episode, for what they're doing on Smallville, and it should be looked at that in that way, that this is Smallville's take on the character. And is he working for the story? Yes, he is. He's setting up a story arc that's going to be played out through the first half of the season, which was the Vigilante Registration Act. And for that purposes, I think it's fine. But if you're a fan of Deathstroke and want to see the incarnation that's in the comics or something close to it, you're going to be heavily disappointed with that. We also have Green Arrow in this episode. Justin Hartley had become a regular on the series in Season 8. He had been a guest star, a recurring guest star in Season 6, came back for one episode in Season 7, and yeah, in Season 8 he became a regular member of Smallville after Lex and Lana left. So it was a wise decision to make, Justin Hartley a main character. Since you're losing two big characters, might as well get another big character to fill in their shoes. And Justin Hartley was a great addition, and by this point in Season 10, he had already revealed his identity to the world. So the whole world already knew that Oliver Queen was the Arrow, the Green Arrow. And yeah, he went up there and decided to save Clark's identity, because Clark in the beginning of the episode wanted to reveal his identity and sign up to the Vigilante Registration Act. And it was Oliver that decided, you know what, I'll take that risk, because if the government is up to something, then it's better that they take me, since they already know my identity. And Oliver, they tried beating it out of him that, hey, who are these other friends of yours? I want them to sign up too, so we can capture all of you and put you in this little prison that we have in this harbor. And yeah, Oliver kept their secret, because he's still loyal to his team. He's not gonna, rat out his friends just because he made a stupid mistake. And he knew there was going to be something more to this than he realized. That's why he was taking this risk, because he was the only one that had nothing else to lose. Because I think by this point also he had already lost his company as well. So it's funny how, the Oliver on Arrow had also already lost all his money and his company and all that. So it makes me wonder if one day Oliver will eventually reveal his identity to the world. Will everybody know who Oliver Queen really is one day? That's going to be something that will be interesting if the creators of Arrow do decide to take the character in that direction. Because it does happen in the comics, I believe, as well. So I'd be interested for that. We also get a little bit of Lois and Clark interaction where they, they're learning from Aquaman and Mera. Mera is Aquaman's new girl, as I said earlier, and yeah, Lois and Clark are kind of having these little, not trust issues, but Lois wants to be more into the action. She wants to help Clark more on these, little missions that he goes on. And Clark is still kind of keeping secrets from her. And when Lois and Clark both see Aquaman and Mera's relationship, that kind of sees that, hey, look, if we're going to have a relationship, let's make it more like theirs, because they seem to be working together really well as a team. And Mera, I like that Mera even points out to Lois that how a lot of the superheroes that, especially the three superheroes that are on this show are the three that she has relationships with. Aquaman was the first one. He had an attraction to her and she had an attraction to him. Then it was Oliver. And obviously this season, by season 10, by season 8, they were already building the relationship. But by season 10, it was official because it was already the last season, right? So give us that relationship if you're going to end the series. And so it was good. It was a good way to have these two characters look at these other two guest characters and have them be influenced by them, because that was always the point of bringing in these superheroes, for Clark to be inspired by what they do and try to use that in his life. So other than that, guys, I'm giving this episode an 8 out of 10. I really thought it was good. I felt that, yeah, if you look at the Slade character, he's not really that... He's not badass. I'm going to say that. And especially if you compare it to the Arrow version, it's a very bad take on that character. They could have used, they could have called him anything else, but they decided to use Slade as the name, just for the fans, I guess, because they thought, oh, yeah, we'll put Deathstroke in Smallville, even though he's not going to dress like Deathstroke. All they do is give him an eye patch at the end of the episode. And his final confrontation with Clark at the end was kind of weak, too. I'm going to admit that. I was disappointed with the final confrontation. Even though it's not his final appearance and he does return in another episode, I felt that the confrontation between Clark and him, there was a little back and forth with the words, but that was about it. And then an explosion happens and, oh, we find out Slade escaped somehow and survived. Other than that, I thought the episode was really solid. I thought it was really good. And there were some things that bugged me. Nothing big. It was a little nitpicky here and there that I would... If I were to tear it apart, it would be little nitpicks. And, but other than that, yeah, it's just a great episode. I really enjoyed it. And comparing Slade, like I said, to the Slade on Arrow, it's just a big departure. So if you're going in for that just to see Deathstroke being badass and kicking ass, you're not going to get that. Just go in knowing that. But it's still a good episode, and I'd recommend it just for that. So until next time, guys, take care.